Hello, I'm Unbound Sage, and today I'd like to discuss mortals' places in Godforge, right? How does a mortal fare against the gods? What's the day-to-day life look for a peasant versus a warrior versus whatever? And, things of that nature. So I think to start, I want to categorize a common versus an uncommon versus a rare. I think that there is lore implications here. And I think a good way to think about this is how much ether do they have access to, right? Or like how trained are they, right? How much, and I think some of that can be access to ether. So if you look at these people here, these are obviously warrior people that know how to fight, but their training is meh, right? Or maybe their combat style is meh, right? By the developers of the team, right? You kind of see, like this is just a dog, right? This is, I don't think satyrs are known for their fighting, like as a race, not particular ones, but just as a race, they're not really known for their fighting ability. This is just a guy with an axe and an anger issue, right? These are competent. They could all beat me up, right? Like I can't fight any of these people, but like, in the realm of gods, these are nobodies, right? And if you look here, these are people with a bit more respect, a bit more training. You have a Spartan, you have a royal guard, you have a knight, like a knight of Camelot, right? You have a lion, you have a mummy, but you have a ninja, right? And so I think all these people could beat up these people, right? You're not gonna be like, who would win, a Spartan or a random Viking? It's like, well, Spartan, right? They're just the vibe, not actual like combat, just the vibe, right? Spartan feels a more elite than a Viking, right? And like a hoplite is more like the level of a berserker, right? Now, what I think separates the rares from the uncommons is ether, right? From the ether well, the source of creation. We know this is the reason that these people have lived 100 years through the shattering. We know from Aaron, right, the lead narrative director, that mortals' lives are prolonged through ether, right? So named characters, the shattering happened, and then these people are here, right? And so all of these people have access to ether, or somehow, they are prolonging their lives through the use of ether. Is that intentional? Are they seeking it out? Do they need daily doses of ether? Like, do they need to carry an ether stone on them, that if it's destroyed, they lose their mortality till they find a new one? Who knows, right? But that is kind of the difference between these guys and these guys, right? Is their access to ether. So if you think about it, right? Like, isn't just, like Hippolyta? I don't actually know these people that well, but like, what's the difference between like Lady Jacques versus like a knight? Like, realistically, Lady Jacques was a priestess. She's not really a fighter, right? She has obsidian resin. I don't want to say Hippolyta because I don't know if she's a god or not. I don't know her background, but I do know Lady Jacques' background, right? And I feel like a knight of Camelot would beat Lady Jacques in a fight. It's, she's using obsidian weapons and he's fully armored. Like, obsidian's not going to cut him, it's going to break against his armor. But the access to ether empowers her, making her stronger than just a common knight, right? And then up here, these are people that probably have greater access to ether. There are some gods here as well, but a lot of these are mortals that would have some influence, right? Like Leonidas, leads the Spartans, right? I'm sure the Spartans are still loyal to him. Achilles, leads his the Myrmidons, right? Is that who they were? His army, right? His army of Greek soldiers. Musashi's a competent duelist who could, I'm pretty sure that's his lore, right? And so he could get this ether easily, right? If you look at all these people, they could definitely get ether, right, to some amount. And I think here with the gods, they are naturally immortal. But the reason why this gap isn't as large as it used to be is because these gods are diminished, right? So immortal beings are diminished from the shattering, and mortals are raised by the power of ether, right? And there are even some gods, or there are even some mortals that have the scariness of a god. And so there's none here. I think all these people are gods. Just double check this here. I mean, this is a demigod, but same vibe. Like, I don't know if Sphinx is really a god, but it's an immortal, right? Yeah, all these people are gods. I think YDG, same thing. You know, like maybe he's not a god, but he's immortal, right? He's very powerful, right? So it's fine. But then like Oda Nobunaga is not a god, right? But he is definitely someone who could procure a large amount of ether. All of Japan loves him, right? So when I imagine when he was resurrected, it was very easy for him to organize Izumo in a way. I don't know if he's the leader of Izumo or not, but it would be easy for him to have a following to give him a lot of ether, that he is on the level of gods. He's an eternal legendary as well, so he's not just like at the level of gods. He's a little bit above, right? He's a little bit, you know, he's kind of a notch above. He's at like the Zeus-ish level, right? He's with like Amaterasu, and you know, that's actually the two Eternals for Izumo, right? He's on the level of the Sun God. So either seems to be a pretty big deal, and your access to it. So, you know, that's something to keep note of here. I only think there are two mortals that I'm sure of. I know that there's Medusa, who is also a legendary, and Noda, right? And you can imagine both these people being able to gather a large amount of ether with Medusa's, you know, snake-like charm and the ability to petrify people, right? Maybe she just stumbled across a large cave as well. And so, you know, and a lot of these, you know, I don't know these, he might also be immortal. I'm not sure though, right? And Mulan obviously is a mortal as well. I missed her. But, you know, everyone else I think is a god at the legendary level. So it'd be interesting to see, you know, especially as an eternal legendary, how did Mulan get to this level, right? And I think the answer will be ether, right? A large chunk of ether. Maybe she stumbled across it, right? Maybe, you know, when the royalties collide, it fell into her house, right? She just has a ton of ether. I don't know the history of Mulan that well. I just know the Disney movie, but just from the Disney movie, I can't imagine even like a romanticized version of that, her being as strong as, say, like Wukong, right? Or like the dragons, or even Pangu. Like this is crazy to think of that, right? So what does life look like for these people with ether involved? And I think there's some cool plot points here that I kind of want to speculate about. And so imagine that you're just a farmer, that you find an ether stone, or you find raw ether, and you study a little bit, you take some time, you carefully experiment with it, and you find a way. You find it's the power of creation. Maybe you heard rumors about it, right? Maybe it's a place like, what would be, let me look at the realms here, right? What realm do you think would have the most knowledge of ether, right? Like, how do the realms deal with ether, right? That's another good question. So I think if we talked about the realm with the most freedom, would probably be Omeokon, right? Because the mortals and probably have the closest connection to their gods, just as they're a very spiritual people. They like the nobility makes a big point of these very gruesome spiritual connections, versus these other people might not have the same spiritual connections. I also forgot about King Arthur as well as another mortal. I don't know if it's clear if he's a mortal or not though. I don't know if he classifies as a mortal with all the stuff he has done, but you know, imagine you're an Omeokon farmer and you find this ether stone and you pray to one of your gods, and the god tells you, right? It's a very friendly god, and tells you, hey, this is a power of creation, you know, and then instead of sowing your seeds, you call upon ether almost like magic to create seeds in the soil, and all of a sudden you can farm like 100 times the land you normally could. And then when you need rain, you use the ether to create a rain cloud, right? And so I think ether in the hands of mortals would be an interesting thing to see. Maybe there's a farmer that's harmlessly using it to grow more crops, right? And the only labor he has to do now is to harvest, right? But it saves him a lot of the backbreaking labor of plowing the fields and sowing the seeds and water, you know, make sure there's enough water and tending to the crops as well. And so I think that's an interesting dynamic as well. I think that's what makes this like such a cool D&D kind of session as well. I think the idea of imagine a group of people getting Aether that might not have the best intentions for it. Imagine the power of creation, unleashed onto like a small town by the Thieves Guild to cause a distraction to loot the city, right? And I think a D&D setting book where it's just the people, right? The people of Ryven too. And then one last thing I want to talk about is how the primal powers might be how they might deal with Aether as well. I'm sure Destiny has bigger things to do than worry about Aether getting into mortal hands. But I think Chaos actually wants mortals to have Aether because it's fun. It's chaotic. It's interesting. It's creative. And I think Order would not want Aether to get into the hands of mortals. So I think there could be a plot point where the agents of Order round up Aether and stockpile it away, while the agents of Chaos maybe even distribute it to sow more chaos, right? Imagine a plot point where Chaos and his minions, right, give a bunch of Aether to Tien, right? A Order aligned plane, right? We know that Tien is an Order aligned realm. So imagine, the agents of Chaos, maybe there's a couple there in Tien. I don't know a few offhand. I don't know any Chaos people in Tien, but interesting nevertheless. So yeah, I just wanted to share some lore thoughts on the nature of Aether. Yeah, I'd love to hear you guys' comments below about what you guys think would be cool plot points. How do you feel, if a plot point started with a mortal, even like a berserker, coming in and getting Aether and causing destruction, and the gods had to come think of it. Or another big point that I kind of forgot about and I want to touch on is this is a great way for Godforge and for Fateless to come up with original characters. It could be someone that was not part of mythology, that they kind of don't have a character that fits they say they want a character that is from Virage, that fits a certain plot point, that they can't quite find the right person to do it. I think it would be cool if in the case of Virage, where like there's a witch, right, a hag that finds some Aether and becomes an epic hero, right, with their use of Aether. And so I imagine it'd be, sparingly, I don't want this to be the large majority of it, but I think there would be space and coolness to, okay, yeah, we're going to release some new heroes. Let's say it's like the Poseidon update, right? We're doing the big Poseidon story. I think, if we did like Poseidon gets released as a legendary, and then, we have an epic, like two epics that are relevant to the story or to the Poseidon, or just they want to add to the game, that are from history. And then there's like a rare that's just, hey, here's the backstory of the rare, right? They're a Virage unit that, it is, let's say the hag's rare. And it's like, this is a character that got born in Ryven. They are from Ryven, but they found Aether. And now they're kind of immortal and they're kind of rising in power. And I think also as well, to really emphasize that, is we know in other games, there are more powerful versions of the starters. So what happens, how we can make that work in Godforge is Ramses, who's Grady Zoc and Guan Yu, can find a lot of Aether, enough to empower them further. And you can become like Spirit Seeker Jacques, because she's a big like spiritual lady, right? So she's like, instead of like attacking with her obsidian sword, like the Makahito weapon, she attacks with like spirit serpents, right? So she, instead of, she has like these like magical serpents floating around her that she attacks with, right? The vision serpents. Guan Yu becomes like Avatar Guan Yu because he's like the god of war, right? He realizes that form of himself, and then Ramses, considers himself to be a god, right? So you just call him King Ramses, right? Just like King Arthur up here, right? And not up here, in the other one. But and then you can have these cooler starters, and the lore significance is, hey, they found a bunch of ether. So I think, to wrap things up, I think in the story, look out for ether, see how it affects the story, see how it affects these mortals, and that's what's going to take mortals to the level of gods in their diminished form from the shattering. So, it's kind of the MacGuffin. It's kind of the whatever it needs to be. It is primarily the power of creation as well. But we know at the very least we know it can create things because there's the ether well, right? It's the source of all creation. And we know it prolongs the lives of mortals. And those two powers are very powerful indeed. So I'm interested to see, plot points where, these weaker heroes, even like a no-name, like a berserker, gets some ether and causes some trouble, or if it's like a side point. I think those would make really cool stories, and then all of a sudden the gods have to jump in or whatever reasons, like, oh man, this berserker is, encroaching on our territory and we need to come and stop him. And that's a cool plot point now. It's like, and there's just, think of like Ultimate Death Knight from Raid, where it's like, hey, there was a Death Knight that's a common that no one cares about. And now there's like this Ultimate Death Knight that's just destroying cities. So yeah, that's what I have to share for you today. Like I said, leave comments, subscribe if you like the lore speculations. Soon, I'm going to have an interview with another person lined up here. And then we might have the mini game soon as well. So we might actually have some real gameplay to talk about. So exciting stuff around the corner. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of it. And I will catch you guys in the next video. Take care. Bye.